Right now, time to go to Louisville, Kentucky. We'll get the latest on Charlie Strong with Jason Anderson, who is the host of The Zone on the ESPN 680 in Louisville, ESPNLouisville.com. You can find him on Twitter. It's at ESPN 680 or at J680 Anderson. Jason Anderson joins us right now. Hey, Jason, Vince, and John Adams. Good morning, Jason. How you doing?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
Well, appreciate it. We're great. So before I try to get too specific with a question, you tell us the latest on Charlie Strong and what you're hearing in terms of him potentially being Tennessee's coach or staying at Louisville.
Well, you guys are right. I mean, it seems to change by the minute, by the second, and especially on Twitter. I mean, what used to be a 24-hour news cycle has become a 24-minute news cycle. But as of last night, the feeling around Louisville was the quote that we had heard, the quote that I had heard, the quote that a lot of people had heard, probably using the same source, was, if Charlie Strong is leaving, then he's the greatest poker player ever. Recruits are saying that he's not going anywhere. Players' mothers are saying he's not going anywhere. Clint Hurt came out yesterday, the lead recruiter here for Louisville and defensive line coach came out yesterday and said, we're out recruiting. We're getting ready for the Sugar Bowl against Florida. He was in his office all weekend. He was this, he was that. If he was out recruiting, he must be, or if he was out talking with Tennessee, he must be, at two different places at one time because it's impossible. So all of this news coming out last night was the feeling around Louisville was that he was going to stay. I don't think there's any doubt that the people at Louisville felt like there was a decision for Charlie Strong to make. And as of the latest, about 5 minutes ago, Adam Himmelsbach, who's a columnist here at the Louisville Courier-Journal, is putting out that a Louisville source is telling him that the school is now working on renegotiating Charlie Strong's contract at this hour and using a certain firm as well here in town to help renegotiate that contract with Charlie Strong. So that is the absolute latest as of about 5 minutes ago in terms of U of L and Charlie Strong.
You're right about that, though. It does change so rapidly. And another thing, and you mentioned great poker player. Yeah, some of these guys really are. That's why I don't rule out, no matter how strong and how certain the denial seems, I just don't ever rule it out.
No, I don't either. I mean, there's so many different things that go into it as well. I mean, you guys have probably heard just as much as we have that, assistant coaches being part of it as well, and Charlie Strong wanting to bring down certain guys, and the Tennessee Athletic Department saying, no, there are certain guys on staff that we need you to retain and keep. And I think one of those names that's thrown out there is Clint Hurt, who I don't know, you guys would know better than I do, I don't know if Tennessee is willing to take on Clint Hurt, who is so embroiled in the Miami scandal, whose name was thrown around, all of that stuff. That's Louisville's lead recruiter. That's the guy that goes down into Miami and gets those kids because he was on that Miami staff. Well, Clint Hurt 2 years ago was being offered a job to leave at Auburn and up his salary and make him the lead recruiter for Auburn and Gene Chizik, which is a good thing he didn't go now looking back. But at the time, Charlie Strong talked with Clint Hurt, talked with Tom Jurich. They came together and they retained Clint Hurt. They got him to stay at Louisville. And I wonder now if the conversation around Tennessee is you can't bring Clint Hurt, if that would be a deal breaker for Charlie Strong saying I could have let him go to Auburn and I made sure he stayed with me. I can't then leave him behind and go to a different job. I wonder if that's part of it. But you're right. There's so many different things that play into it.
Well,
there's about a million different factors, and we probably look at one or two.
You're right to mention all the variables. I just wonder, though, I think if Tennessee is really trying to get a coach who, in Charlie Strong's case, has a good job already, he's had success there. If you're going to go after those kind of guys, you don't have a lot of leverage, and you can't be setting restrictions on these guys. You got to say, hey, you bring who you want. You don't tell them. I would have a hard time believing that Dave Hart would tell any candidate, hey, you've got to keep these two guys that are here already on your staff. I mean, that would be a deal breaker for a lot of guys. It's not just the guys who they might want to bring. It's the idea that they don't have the control they would like. Right. And don't you think that would be if Charlie Strong would make this move, don't you think he would want all the control he could get?
I think he would. I think he would absolutely. Maybe not a lot of control that maybe some other coaches or maybe a John Gruden would offer or want or need. But I would think at the very minimum he would want the control and the hiring and firing power of his own staff and his assistant coaches and the guys that he's going to be trusting to go out and get the kids to bring into the program and do it the right way and make sure there's nothing shady going on or anything like that. I would think that at the very minimum, if he's going to take a job somewhere and leave what you're completely right about, a very happy spot here at Louisville working for Tom Jurich in the athletic department, if that's the case, at the very minimum, he would need full hiring and firing power amongst his assistant coaches.
Let's just, for hypothetical purposes, assume the latest tweets are incorrect and that Charlie Strong still might come to Tennessee. If he did, do you think Louisville would go back to Bobby Petrino and try and bring back the Bobby Petrino era?
It's really hard for me to wrap my mind around that possibility. I just can't see it happening because, I think Tom Jurich would look at it and say that, all of the years of doing everything he could for Bobby Petrino for 4 straight years, and year after year after year, Bobby Petrino was flirting with other jobs, and clearly he's a different guy now, but he left you once, and he cheated on you before. I just don't know if the full forgiveness would be given by the fan base, if they would be able to embrace and bring back a Bobby Petrino. It's really hard for me to see that ever happening. I think there are certain fans, there's a segment of the fan base that would absolutely be all for it because they loved what Bobby Petrino did, and they look at the team that Louisville has with the NFL wide receivers on the outside and an NFL quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater, and they say, boy, what could happen with Bobby Petrino there as the head coach in that offense? How great could that be? I just don't think with all of the outside things and the outside factors and the fact that Louisville is one of the schools that he's already burned. I mean, it's one thing for him to go, to Tennessee or, to Wisconsin or any other, Colorado. It's another thing to go back to a school that he's already burned, being Louisville.
Getting the latest on Charlie Strong from Louisville, from Jason Anderson, host of The Zone on ESPN 680 out of Louisville, here on the New Sentinel Sports page, and Vince Ferrara along with John Adams. I've heard a number of people say that the fans have already started to turn on Charlie Strong. He had the denials, not only the denials somewhat, but also taking some shots at the fans and saying they weren't as passionate as Kentucky fans, which is always dicey. What do you make of that exchange between Charlie Strong and the fans to this point?
To use a football analogy, he fumbled, and he fumbled it big time. When talking about the job openings, when talking about the fans, there's a number of people that are defending Charlie Strong that have come after me as well because I've played the comments from Charlie Strong, and people will take the stance that, well, he was asked the question. This wasn't unprompted. He was asked the question, what do you want to see from the fans? Which is so open-ended that he can go anywhere. He can answer nothing. The fans are fine. He took that open-ended question and said, well, the fans have to show more passion. And Card March, nobody was there. And Senior Day, I can't believe what happened there. I'd like to see them be like the Big Blue Nation and the passion down there. They travel and they take over, which is a huge open mouth, insert foot, and totally, he said not to pour salt on the wound, but that's what it is. That's what it does to the fan base around here. You pour salt on the wound. Not to mention the fact that it's completely false. I mean, his friend Joker Phillips is coaching for Florida now as the wide receivers coach because he was fired via a lack of fan support. So, basketball traveling and football traveling are different, not to mention the fact that when Bobby Petrino was the head coach with Louisville and they went to the Orange Bowl, they sent 35,000 fans to the Orange Bowl, and they're already past the 18,000 mark for tickets for the Sugar Bowl as well. They sent 12,000 to the Belk Bowl last year. So his point about the BBN taking over and traveling, it falls on deaf ears here in Louisville because this is a fan base that for bowl games actually travels really well, and you just can't compare Kentucky basketball to Louisville football when it's such an infant in terms of college football history, and Kentucky basketball goes back to Adolph Rupp, in a long time ago. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, and there are plenty of fans that were offended by it, and I have no reason to believe why they shouldn't, and I think they probably should be offended by those comments.
Maybe he needs to take lessons from Ozzie Guillen. He knows how to.
Nice.
Yeah, Jason, what do you think of Charlie Strong there now? Do you think if Charlie Strong left Louisville that this would be a devastating loss? What's your opinion on the job he's done there, and what do you think of him as his ceiling, what he might do in the next few years if he stayed there?
Well, I think the ceiling is pretty high for Charlie Strong if he stays here. What he's done on the recruiting front to get kids out of Miami to go play Big East football in Louisville is astounding, and the fact that now you'd be playing in the ACC down against Florida State and Miami, now you'd actually be able to recruit a little bit better in those areas. He talked about on Monday, one of the few things that he talked about besides coaching rumors and fans was getting into Atlanta now, getting into the Georgia area, because they're in the ACC now. I think certainly the sky is the limit with Charlie Strong here because of what he's shown in 3 years and digging out of the Steve Kragthorpe era. But in terms of how it would be received and him leaving from Louisville, I think naturally it would be received as ho-hum, just another day. Louisville's a Big East school that's going to the ACC, and Tennessee is in the SEC. That makes a whole lot of sense. Here in Louisville, I think you'd have two different types of fans that would have, conflicting opinions on Charlie Strong. One of those would be the fans would be very upset because Charlie Strong has said, and he's come out strong, pardon the pun, in respecting the program, and this is not a stepping stone job, and fans need to realize that Louisville is different, working for Tom Jurich is different. How can I come in? In fact, he told Jim Rome, back in September, that how can I, look for a job year after year after year, 26 years as an assistant coach, and Tom Jurich gives me my first opportunity, and I get all these kids to come into Louisville and to believe in me and to buy into me, and then I leave at the first opportunity after just a few years. His exact words were, Jim, I'm just not cut like that, which was very strong, which came out passionate about the Louisville program, which the fans ate up. They loved it. They felt warm inside by their head coach, Charlie Strong, that was saying everything that they felt for a long time, that this shouldn't be a stepping stone job. This should be something that that coaches look at and appreciate more, but Bobby Petrino just simply didn't, and John L. Smith just simply didn't. Both of them look back and say mistakes. Leaving Louisville was one of the first things that they did. So I think fans would be upset that he left after saying that and coming out as passionate as he did. And I think the flip side of that would be fans would look at it and say, let's take a step back. Steve Kragthorpe got beat by 30 points against Rutgers in his last game in front of 10,000 people, the Friday after Thanksgiving, just 3 years ago. And now 3 years later, Teddy Bridgewater is going to have a Heisman campaign next year. They're playing in a Sugar Bowl in the BCS this year, and they're going to the ACC. All things that wouldn't have happened if Charlie Strong didn't take over the program and get the thing rolling in the right direction. If this program was playing football the way they were 3 years ago under Steve Kragthorpe, they're still in the Big East, and UConn is excited that they're going to the ACC, and that's on Charlie Strong's shoulders, and I think there's a segment of the fan base that would still appreciate that and recognize that even if he left.
Talking to Jason Anderson about Charlie Strong out of Louisville, 680, ESPN 680 out of Louisville, here on the new Sentinel Sports page. Jason, just hypothetically, if Charlie Strong does take the Tennessee job, who on that staff, or maybe someone outside of the Louisville staff, who could you envision him bringing to Tennessee on that staff, or maybe someone else?
I think he might bring a number of the guys on the staff. I think he's very loyal to the guys that he has. I think Tom Jurich would first and foremost probably look at some of the guys on the staff and analyze whether or not they would be good enough to be a head coach. I've heard Sean Watson's name thrown around a couple of times, the old offensive coordinator at Nebraska that came to Louisville after he was relieved of his duties up there in Lincoln, came to Louisville to be the quarterback's coach once they got Teddy Bridgewater. And when Louisville fired their offensive coordinator, promoted him to offensive coordinator, his name was thrown around with the Auburn job, when that job opening first became apparent that Gene Chizik was out. So I think Tom Jurich would look at him and analyze whether or not he'd be good enough for a head coach. Vance Bedford, the defensive coordinator, certainly talks the talk, walks the walk. If he brings, I think Louisville fans would hate to lose a guy named Kenny Carter, who's the running backs coach and a special teams coach and a heck of a recruiter and a growing recruiter. So if Charlie Strong took the job and was able to bring down Clint Hurd, who 2 years ago was the nation's number one recruiting assistant via ESPN, or number one assistant coach, lead recruiter via ESPN's rankings, and brought Kenny Carter as well, and maybe even Vance Bedford, I think you'd have a number of guys in place that have been doing wonders on the recruiting trail, getting kids to Louisville to play Big East football. That would have no problem getting kids to Tennessee to play SEC football.
So once again, Jason Anderson from ESPN 680 out of Louisville telling us that Adam Himmelsbach from the Louisville Courier Journal saying, reporting that a school source has told them they're working on negotiations with on Charlie Strong's contract with the help of an outside source. Anything change in the last 10 minutes while you've been talking to us, Jason? Any new information out there?
Adam Himmelsbach has tweeted out since then that, quote, anything can happen at this point, end quote, the U of L source told him. But U of L is making its push to keep Charlie Strong, his words, not mine. And then I just saw something come out that Mike Gundy is now Jimmy Hyams. I don't know if...
He's from our station, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he just reported that Oklahoma State coach Mike Gundy no longer in the UT coaching search. Charlie Strong remains a candidate. I mean, it literally, it's changing every 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. I think you guys are a lot like the fans in Louisville. Just get to an end point. Let's figure out what's going on, and we can all move on.
Yeah, and thank goodness for Twitter, at times at least.
At times, at least.
Yeah. Hey, Jason, great to talk to you. Really appreciate it. Heard a lot of great things about you, and thanks for your insight here this morning.
Hey, guys, anytime, give me a call.
Thanks. That is Jason Anderson from ESPN 680 out of Louisville.